fine.
Good morning. A warm welcome to the Humanist community in Silicon Valley Sunday Forum, to those joining us on Zoom and to those joining us here in person at the Mountain View Senior Center. My name is Ray Sunby, president of the Humanist community. The Humanist community is a chapter of the American Humanist Association. Humanism is a secular and reality-based philosophy of life that affirms our ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the greater good. We value freedom, health, happiness, fairness, compassion, and using science and reason to acquire and apply knowledge. If these words describe your thinking, we invite you to become a member of the Humanist community. Membership forms are available on our website. A special welcome to those who are with us for the first time. We wish you to continue listening to our weekly forums and other events. You can find all our events listed on the website. Please aid us in continuing to present these forums by donating to the Humanist community. You can find out how to donate on our website, www.humanists.org.
Okay, today Sharat is going to discuss the news coverage of the war in Gaza and the present humanitarian crisis. Controlling narratives is a crucial part of this conflict, and I guess all conflicts. And those narratives are asymmetrically propagated, not so much by what is reported as by what is not reported. Dr. Lin writes and lectures on global political economy in the Middle East and public health. He's been to Gaza, the West Bank, and to Israel several times, and he's been an eyewitness to some of the great upheavals of the Arab world. He's affiliated with Human Agenda, the San Jose Peace and Justice Center, and in the Initiative for Equality. Please welcome Dr. Sharat Lin.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Thanks, Alex, for that introduction, and I'm really glad to be back here. It's been a while. I haven't spoken here since before the pandemic, so it's good to see some old faces again. So today, yes, I'm going to talk about, I guess what everybody is saying is the hot topic of the day, namely the conflict in the Middle East between Israel and the Palestinians. I mean, it's often framed. Again, the important point is often the framing, and the framing is often a war between Israel and Hamas, as if Hamas were something totally separate from the Palestinian people, and but it's all taken out of context. It's important to put whatever happens into historical context, into the context of other events that are happening in the Middle East, in the region, and what are the root causes of this conflict. Now, first of all, the framing of this as a war presumes that there are two sides that are roughly equal, that have armies that are at least somewhat symmetric. I mean, for example, if you take the fighting in Ukraine, you have regular armies of Ukraine, the regular army of Russia, and so there's an approximate match there. The structure of these two armies are comparable, and so that is a war. In the case of Israel-Palestine, Israel really has the monopoly on military force. It has a regular army. That army has a modern air force, has the latest weaponry, mostly sold to it or given to it by the United States. So it has some of the most advanced military hardware that the United States has available to it, that the United States does not even sell to many of its European allies. Israel is a nuclear power. Israel is the only country with which the United States has actually shared, its nuclear secrets, because a lot of Israelis have dual citizenship, so they can get a security clearance and have access to the Los Alamos lab or the Lawrence Livermore lab, and so it's a very unique relationship between the United States and Israel. And on top of that, the United States has been giving Israel about $3.8 billion worth of military aid every year. So, that's sort of the brief of it. Let's acknowledge that the attack that happened on October 7th by Hamas, by the military wing of Hamas, was something that should never happen to civilians. It is I mean, something like 1,200 people were killed, and about 3/4, 80% of them were civilians. That can never be justified. At the same time, it's important to recognize the context, the situation that the Palestinian people have been under ever since the state of Israel was created, and in fact, even from before that. And given that the Palestinian people have been under occupation ever since 1948, there are rights under international law that say that people who are occupied have a right to resist, and so Palestinian people have a right to exist. The question is how can they resist? What are their options? And unfortunately, they have very few options, because Israel is such a superior military force and has the support of what is today the sole superpower in the world, the United States of America. And also because the United States, our government, is the enabler in this conflict. This is not simply a conflict that is happening 8,000 miles away, that its cause is 8,000 miles away. Okay, this is something, because the US is the enabler, we would not be in this situation of Israel creating all the settlements in the West Bank. We would not be in this situation today if the United States had not given all of this unconditional support to the Israeli government. So it's a matter for us to, as the American people, as American voters, to ask whether our government is doing the right thing, and then to pressure our government into what I mean. Today, the most immediate issue is an immediate and permanent ceasefire to put an end to the killing, and then start a process of serious negotiation towards a peaceful solution where the Palestinian people and the Israeli people can live side by side, whether it is in a two-state solution, two states side by side, two equal states. We know that under the present circumstances, Israel would never accept Palestine as an equal state with a right to its own self-defense. But through a process of negotiation, through a process of the United States backing those kinds of talks, if we were to really be serious about peace, we would have to back those kinds of talks to have either a two-state solution where two equal states, each one with a right of self-defense, can live side by side, or else, given that there have been so many settlements in the West Bank, that the prospect of actually carving out a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza is greatly diminished if you look at it today versus what it was 20 years ago, or for example, 30 years ago, at the beginning of the Oslo, what's called the Oslo process. There were talks held in Oslo in 1993, and it set forth a process, what we call the Oslo process, which was a sort of on paper, it was a Palestinianization of the West Bank by Israel handing over control, or agreeing to, under certain conditions, to hand over control to the Palestinian Authority, and the creation of different zones, right? So there were areas in the West Bank that were designated as area A, B, and C, and the areas A are the Palestinian cities, the major cities like Ramallah, like Jenin, like Nablus, Hebron, Jericho. These are area A, and so the areas that are designated A were to be officially under full Palestinian Authority control, right? And then there's area C, which are under full Israeli military control in the West Bank. So if you go outside of the cities, and then the areas that include the settlements in the West Bank, those are area C. And then you have area B, which is the small towns, the villages, the Palestinian villages. Those are under, theoretically at least, joint Israeli military and Palestinian Authority control. But ultimately, who's the power in the West Bank? In 2002, Israel launched an all-out assault on the West Bank, sending tanks, armored vehicles into all the cities, including, for example, Bethlehem, and the Church of the Nativity was under siege for 1.5 months in April and May of 2002. And then there have been, and of course these kinds of incursions into the West Bank have accelerated once again with the new government. So when Prime Minister Netanyahu formed a new government, forging a new alliance with right-wing parties that were, much more pro-settler, pro-aggression. This government was formed in November, December of last year. So we're at the 1-year mark of this ultra right-wing government, which includes leaders like Bezalel Smotrich, like Yoav Gallant, who are much more aggressive than the ministers in previous governments, and they have spoken repeatedly, implying that they would like the settlements to increase, that Israel should take over more and more territory, and the Palestinian people should leave. So one of the framings of the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians has been, from the very beginning. It's a little bit less now because it's not possible to the facts don't support framing it this way, but to frame this not as an Israel-Palestine conflict, but as an Israeli-Arab conflict. So if we go back to 1948, or even before that, I mean, I actually want to go touch a little bit on the history before the formation of the Israeli state. But for the moment, let's just talk about the framing of the Arab-Israel conflict, right? And the initial war, the several wars, the 1956, the 1967, the 1973 wars, could reasonably be framed as Arab-Israeli conflicts because there were Arab countries, there were Arab armies that were involved either in fighting with Israel, either invading, as happened in 1956, or Israel, counterattacking and then winning completely in, for example, 1967, when it took over the control of the West Bank and Gaza. But framing it as an Israel-Arab conflict rather than Israel-Palestine conflict enabled two things. One, it enabled Israel to claim that it is the David in this David and Goliath kind of confrontation between all these Arab countries with much larger populations surrounding Israel. Israel is this lone state. By framing it as an Israel-Arab conflict, it could be the David against the Goliath, and hopefully David would win. That is much less tenable today because the Arab states some of them have signed peace treaties, like Jordan and Egypt have signed peace treaties with Israel. Other Arab states like Iraq had its own war. Of course, that war was imposed on it by the United States. Saudi Arabia, the Gulf countries have sort of pulled back in terms of, I mean, one by one, and very recently they have initiated diplomatic relations with Israel. And so basically the Arab countries throughout the Arab world have pulled back from the Palestine conflict and said, de facto, even though their rhetoric may be otherwise, but their de facto behavior is that they are sort of saying that we're going to pull back from the conflict and we're not going to become frontline confrontational states. And so the conflict now is more between Israel and the occupation of the Palestinian people and the Palestinian people resisting. And the immediate context for what happened on October 7th. October 7th isn't the beginning of a conflict. It is not the beginning of a war. The right-wing government that was formed by Netanyahu in November has greatly accelerated the rhetoric. It has greatly accelerated the aggressiveness of settlers to settlers going out and attacking Palestinians in the West Bank. It has accelerated tensions between the Israeli state and Palestinian citizens of Israel. So there are approximately almost 2 million Palestinians who live inside of Israel, excluding Jerusalem. So the thing is, one thing you have to get used to is that in Israel-Palestine, there are lots of there's a lot of compartmentalization. So of the Palestinians who live within Israel proper, what I mean by Israel proper means the areas that are not considered occupied territories, not the West Bank, not Gaza. of those Palestinians, there are those who in 1948 were residing in Israel west of the Green Line. Green Line was the line of control in 1948. And then there are those who live in a special area, which is Jerusalem, because Jerusalem, remember, under the UN partition plan of November 1947, the United Nations voted to partition Palestine, which was then, Palestine was before the British mandate. And it recognized Jerusalem as an international city, that there should be, even though the final form of control of Jerusalem was not settled, it was still left to be determined. But it was recognized by the United Nations that Jerusalem, because it held the holiest sites for not only Judaism, but also for Islam, the third holiest site of Islam, namely the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and also the holiest sites of Christianity. Okay, including, for example, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. That it deserved international status, so it deserved some kind of a joint or international control. So, for that reason, Jerusalem has historically been considered a separate entity of sorts, and so the Palestinians who live in the Jerusalem municipality have a different kind of ID card. Israel gives them a different ID card, which does not grant them citizenship, but enables them to have access to, allows them to travel within Israel proper. Okay. So anyway, the point is that these Palestinian citizens, whether they are citizens or not, are very definitely second-class citizens, and they don't, for example, have the right to go and settle and make settlements, or to serve in the armed forces, or there are a lot of privileges that they are denied. So anyway, so that is sort of gives you some of the framing. I wanted to talk a little bit more about okay, what happened after the right-wing government came into position in November, December of last year, and that was the acceleration of the settlement activity. IDF soldiers standing by and guarding the settlers as they made attacks, not just with stones, not just with chasing Palestinians away, but actually using arms to kill Palestinians. So the number of Palestinians who have died in the West Bank, I'm not talking about Gaza, in the West Bank, in the year 2023, this year, before October 7th, has more than doubled in the West Bank. So this is the context. The number of arrests that were conducted by the Israeli military in the West Bank has gone up very, very substantially. So the number is in the thousands, and this is much higher than the number of arrests that Israel has made in 2022 or in previous years. And the number of raids, full-blown military raids into West Bank cities like Jenin, like Nablus, Tulkarm, Qalqilia has greatly accelerated to the point where Palestinians feel that their existence, their security is genuinely threatened. So this is the context, and it seems to be, to Palestinians, to be something that is just accelerating, and even though other countries have condemned the settlements, condemned the acceleration of the settlement activity, the aggressiveness. Israel's number one defender, that is to say, our country, the United States, the government of the United States of America, has refused to condemn those actions, has refused to take any action. And anyway, so that's why Palestinians have felt that the world has forgotten about them. The world is not doing anything for them. And the Palestinian Authority, what we have today is we have a Palestinian government that is divided between the West Bank and Gaza. And the way this is framed by the news media and by the US government is that well, the Palestinian Authority is the legitimate government of the Palestinian people, because that's the one that the United States recognizes, right? And it's reported in the US media that, well, I mean, Hamas controls Gaza because it forcibly took control of Gaza back in 2007. But let's just briefly touch upon the history of how these two forces, between Fatah, which is the political party that controls the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, and Hamas, which is also a political party, right? It's not just a militia. When we say that we have all these hospitals that are, I mean, there are UN hospitals, and then there are other hospitals that are just Palestinian hospitals. These hospitals are run by the Palestinian Ministry of Health, which in Gaza is controlled by Hamas, right? So Hamas is healthcare, Hamas is social services, Hamas is also a military for one of the military. There are other militias in Gaza. But let's go back to 2005. So 2005, September was the time that Israel finally withdrew from Gaza. Remember, it seized Gaza in the 1967 war. Settlers came in, and Israel made a decision that it didn't want to bother with militarily controlling the Gaza Strip. And so it asked in fact, it had to force some of them, of the Israeli settlers in Gaza to withdraw. After the settlers were removed, Israel demolished housing, even the housing, the Palestinians could very well have used housing, but they demolished all of the settlement housing because they didn't want the Palestinians to use it. And then elections, the Palestinian Authority organized elections in both the West Bank and Gaza in January of 2006. And Hamas actually won the elections in both Gaza and the West Bank. Okay, this is something that is really de-emphasized, that is really obscured in US media reporting or Western media reporting, is that there were democratic elections and Hamas won in both places. And so, and what happened then was that Israel proceeded to arrest the elected members of the Palestinian National Assembly or National Council, so that they could not take their seats in the Palestinian National Council. Okay, And so for that reason, a government that represented the vote of the Palestinian people could not be seated in either Gaza or the West Bank. And because Israel, relinquished control of Gaza by pulling out in 2005, Hamas was able to take the reins of power in Gaza, and it did so legitimately because it won the elections there, right? And the Palestinian people voted for Hamas not because they like every policy of Hamas, not because they like its armed militancy, but because they at least see Hamas as taking some kind of action, that they're putting up some kind of resistance to the occupation. Whereas in the case of Fatah, which, as I said, controls the Palestinian Authority, but Fatah is doing nothing. So when the Israeli military makes raids into Area A, the cities of the West Bank, the Palestinian police are nowhere to be seen. They do not put up any resistance to what Israel does. And so Palestinians, for that reason, are very disillusioned with Fatah and the Palestinian Authority because it does nothing and it's corrupt. And it's corrupt. Okay. So that's the background to how Hamas actually came to control the Gaza Strip. It's not by some kind of a seizure. It's not by imposing itself through an act of force. It was elected. In terms of the framing, the way it's reported, first of all, there is a differential framing between Israel as a state and Hamas as an organization, a terrorist organization, terrorist because the United States, the U.S. State Department, has created these categories of classifying Hamas as a terrorist organization, and so the difference between a state and an organization is that a state has authority, right? Because it has a government, it has authority, it has the right and the authority to make laws. If a state such as Israel arrests people, if it seizes civilians, those are considered arrests. If an organization, in particular a terrorist organization, does that, it's a kidnapping, or it's a hostage situation. The framing is one between a state has an army that has soldiers, an organization has militants who are terrorists. When an organization, a military organization, seizes someone, that person is a hostage. When a state seizes someone, that person is a prisoner. And John Bolton in a very recent interview, said that very, very blatantly. He said that, well, in terms of he was talking in reference to the possibility of a prisoner exchange. So in other words, you have a temporary ceasefire, and that would be an opportunity for Israel and Hamas to exchange prisoners, to release prisoners from both sides. And John Bolton said that, well, so it's Israel is being asked to release some people that it has arrested in the West Bank, and Hamas is to release these hostages, but the Palestinians are all criminals anyway. That's what John Bolton said, and because they were arrested by a state. So again, this is the differential framing between how you look at a state versus how you look at an organization that has a military wing. The other thing to do is to look at how the number of arrests and killings have greatly accelerated in the West Bank. So what is happening in Gaza is a response to what is happening in the West Bank, and this is one thing that has really been underreported in the U.S. and in the Western media is how many people have been killed. I mean, in 2023, before October 7th, 241 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces in the West Bank. And that is a rate that throughout the year has been far higher, has been more than double, maybe triple, what typically happens in a year. And the number of arrests is also more than doubled over the previous year. So the oppression of Palestinians in the West Bank is the context for why the Hamas attack on October 7th happened, why the timing of that attack on October 7th. The other thing I want to talk about is I want to talk a little bit about reciprocity, about looking at things from the other side. So we see that I mean, over history, Palestinian militant organizations, and there are many. I mean, Hamas is only one of so many. I mean, I myself was taken, captured by a Palestinian militia back in the 1970s. And I don't have time to go into that story, but I understood that Palestinian militia captured me because they just had concerns about, I was there with a camera and I was photographing the area. This was in southern Beirut, and this was a Palestinian militia that is based in Syria and was operating in Beirut in the 1970s, and they had concerns for their own security because someone was coming into their area with a camera, and I was able to convince them. They held me. I was able to convince them that even though I was a U.S. citizen, that I was on their side, and that they released me, and I was never tortured or anything like that. But it was a harrowing experience. I didn't know what the outcome would be, but my point is that that Palestinians have been involved in all sorts of desperate attempts, including armed attempts, including assassinations, including terrorist bombing. These have happened. These are part of history, and we should not whitewash them. But we also have to understand that in a situation of desperation, in a situation of prolonged occupation, what do you do? What are the options when the number one superpower in the world backs your oppressor and backs your oppressor 100%, right? Another issue with the framing is what access does the international media have to the other side? So in the current war, Israel has blocked all access in and out to the Gaza Strip. And one thing that it has very explicitly stated is that it will not allow Western journalists into Gaza. Okay, so not only Palestinians cannot go out, but Western journalists cannot go in. And so that leaves only those news organizations who already had correspondents on the ground in Gaza to have access, to actually be there. And of course, Al Jazeera is one of those networks that has a very extensive network of journalists on the ground. And so we're getting a lot of the information that we're seeing, not just from social media, but also from Al Jazeera journalists in Gaza. And the Israeli policy is deliberate because the intent of that policy is to prevent the story being told from the other side, right? If Western journalists cannot get into Gaza, they cannot go and interview the victims. I mean, one of the very striking things about the Ukraine war was that in the era of televised war, right? Vietnam War was the first televised war. All these wars, the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, all of these were seen through the eyes of the aggressor, because a lot of the journalists were embedded in U.S. forces. The Ukraine war was the first time that we had a televised war, which was seen through the eyes of the people who were under attack. Okay, and so we had so we had this a radically different perspective on the Ukraine war than we had on other wars. And the same is true with the situation in Gaza, because the U.S. reporters are all based in Tel Aviv. A few of them are in Jerusalem, but they're mostly based in Tel Aviv. And of course, this poses a huge problem for Palestinians to tell their side of it, because those reporters cannot actually interview people directly in Gaza. But even for the Palestinian Authority, for Fatah, how does Fatah get its story out? How does Fatah represent its side? And because these journalists are based in Tel Aviv, they have to go through a series of checkpoints to get to the Palestinian capital in Ramallah, which is an obstacle. It's an obstacle for them to get interviews. So what does the Palestinian Authority have to do? They have to have some representatives who have permanent residence in Jerusalem. And they don't have an office. They're not allowed to set up an office. And so the only place that they can meet journalists, and I've seen this with my own eyes, is in front of the King David Hotel. So if you go to Jerusalem, so just west of the old city is the King David Hotel. The King David Hotel was famous because it was bombed by one of the Jewish militias, the Zionist militias, shortly before independence. It was bombed because the Zionist militias were attempting they wanted the British out at that point in time, because the British were limiting immigration, Jewish immigration into Palestine. And anyway, in front of this famous hotel, you have Palestinian Authority representatives waiting there for the press, or the press waiting there for the Palestinian representatives to interview them on what is the official position of the Palestinian Authority. But that is the only point of contact, the only normal point of contact between Western media and the Palestinian Authority. Okay. So there are a lot of these sorts of limitations. I don't know how, okay, I still have maybe a little bit more time. I'll try to wind up. And then finally, there's the other piece of framing, which has accelerated in recent years, both here in the United States as well as in Europe and in other Western countries, which is the attempt to equate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. So anti-Zionism is the criticism of Israel and Israel's policies, just as we would, criticize the policies of any other country. We criticize the policies of China, criticize the policies of the United States. That doesn't mean we're anti-US or anti-China. We're criticizing the policies because these countries are violating human rights, doing something that is unnecessarily aggressive, whatever the reason. And this is the nature of what I see as the criticism of Israel as a human rights violator, as a country that is carrying out a settlement policy that is illegal under international law, that is against, that is intentionally an intentional part of an intentional ethnic cleansing. The term genocide has been used at an unprecedented level in the past 2 months. And I want to point out that genocide, and I really want to go back to the original definition of genocide that was coined in 1948 by a Jewish historian, Raphael Lemkin. So Raphael Lemkin called what happened in the Holocaust genocide, but he specifically defined it as not just a mass killing, but that genocide is the intent to erase an identity, a culture, a language, a people. And unfortunately, what Israeli leaders have said recently with reference to Gaza in particular is unmistakably genocide, because it's about wholesale movement of the Palestinian population. I mean, the reasoning is, well, we have military objectives in Gaza City, we have military objectives in Beit Hanun, and so people should move south into safe zones, and then Israel goes and bombs those safe zones, Rafah, Khan Yunis, and so it's a movement of population, but it's also an intent to ethnically cleanse. It's an intent that because and Palestinians know this, that if they were to even be allowed to cross into Egypt, Egypt does not let them in, because Egypt knows that it's a one-way door. If they are allowed to cross into Sinai, Israel would never give permission for them to cross back into Gaza, because there are statements by Israeli cabinet ministers who have said that they would like Gaza to be cleansed of Palestinians, that Palestinians should all leave Gaza, so that Gaza can be safe for Israel. And this is nothing short of ethnic cleansing. This is nothing short of depriving Palestinians of their homeland. And most of the people, I mean, 80% of the people who are in Gaza today are descended from refugees. So their parents, grandparents were already refugees from 1948, 1967, and previous conflicts. Oh, so I wanted to say a little bit about, when we talk about terrorist organizations, this goes back to the very founding of the State of Israel. And this is something, again, that is never mentioned in the U.S. media, and there's a deliberate effort to not talk about this history, is the role of the Zionist militias, beginning with the founding of the Haganah in 1920. And the purpose of the Haganah was to terrorize Palestinians, and also to stand up against the British authorities, the British administrators of Mandate Palestine, in limiting Jewish immigration into Palestine. The effort to colonize Palestine. Let me say this. So the Jewish population in Palestine consists of, there are two components. There are those who at the beginning of the 20th century lived there. So there are Jews who have lived there for generations, have lived there for centuries. Okay, and they comprised a small percentage of the population of Palestine at the turn of the century. And the rest were immigrants from Europe, from Russia, from even other parts of the Middle East. And the Jewish Agency and the World Zionist Organization sought as a follow-up to the founding of the Zionist movement by Theodor Herzl in 1897 to create a Jewish homeland by promoting Jewish migration into Palestine, which was then under the British Mandate after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. And then these Zionist militias came about to sort of force the hand of the British and also to terrorize Palestinians. The Haganah was not militant enough, and so the Irgun, the Irgun Zvaylumi, was formed in 1931. And they were more militant than the Haganah. And then another one, the Lehi was formed in 1940 because the Irgun was not militant enough. And then the elite organization of the Haganah, the Palmach, in 1941. And so this is the history of Zionist terrorist attacks on Palestinians that played a crucial role in what the Palestinians call a Nakba, the catastrophe of 1948, 1949, in which 750,000 Palestinians were forced from their homes, terrorized from their homes, and cleansed from 531 villages, and as well as the city of Jaffa. Jaffa was the largest city that was totally cleansed of Palestinians, 30,000 Palestinians in 1948, mainly by the Irgun. So this is the history. So there's terrorism on both sides. We have to recognize that. It's a fact of history. But who started it? My point is that I would claim that I would suggest that it was the Zionists who started it, who started the terrorism, and that the Palestinians, even though I cannot justify Palestinian terrorism, but it is a response. It is a response to what the Zionists started. So I'll wind up my comments there, and hope that we can have some good and rational and calm discussion.
So, yes. Great.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. There's very little that you said that I would have any disagreement with. But overall, I did find it to be quite biased and myopic. And I'm just wondering if you can. Sorry. So yeah, so there's not much I would disagree with that you had to say. I did find it to be biased and myopic, and I was just wondering if you could address the religious factors that were involved. So again, the Hamas fighters on October 7th yelled Allahu Akbar, God is great, and just steelman the Israeli perspective as far as from an existential threat, and just looking at it from their perspective as opposed to just the Arab perspective.
Okay, I'm not sure that I fully understand the question, but let me try to make an initial stab at it, and then you can elaborate. So as far as the religious aspect is concerned, I mean, Hamas is an Islamic movement, so the name Hamas is actually an Arabic acronym for Harakat al-Muqawama. So it means the Islamic resistance movement. So so the founding of Hamas is definitely rooted in an Islamic ideology. Okay, and of course, Palestinians, the Palestinian people as a whole, are basically the non-Jewish population of Israel-Palestine. So the Christians, the Muslims, Druze, you know, we can all consider them to be, or they consider themselves to be Palestinians. So indeed, you know, an Islamic movement, I don't think can properly represent the Palestinian people as a whole. But they have credibility. I mean, they have credibility among the Palestinian people to the extent that at least they are taking some action. I don't know.
It is 98%. It is 98% Muslim.
In Gaza,
Someone talks, they don't have to like repeat what they say.
No, so the gentleman was just saying that 98% of the population of Gaza is Muslim. But remember that also that Hamas won the election 2006 in the West Bank. I mean, the majority again is also Muslim, and sadly,
96%.
yeah. So well, I'm not sure if it's quite that high, but certainly what we know is that the Christian population of, you know, areas that used to be Christian strongholds in the West Bank, like Bethlehem, you know, there has been a very substantial outmigration of Christians from areas like Bethlehem. But can you elaborate on the second part of your question? Because I'm not sure that I understood it.
We can't hear.
Yeah. We give you the mic.
Introduce themselves. I'm finding it very helpful this
Fine?
Mark closer, I can say.
Okay.
Also, do we have the people who talk, say their name?
Sure. My name is Greg. Again, I'm not sure which was the second part of the question, but just the notion of framing this purely as a nationalistic type of conflict that's happening between the Palestinians and the Israelis, as opposed to a religious context of a Muslim ideology, specifically what's written in the Quran and Islamic ideology as a whole about the nature of the land that exists there, and thinking about this more holistically as far as what even most of the Palestinians are saying this is about. It's not purely about nationalism. Religion is a huge factor there. And the rounding error of the Christians and the Druids and things like that, this is still a huge Muslim majority against a Jewish minority across the entire Arabic world.
Well, okay, so let's. I mean, what I can say is this: is that the Palestine, it touches a nerve for Muslims, perhaps more than it does for others. I mean, this is particularly true in I can see that in the. So we have the Muslim Community Association, various Muslim groups being very motivated or energized by this conflict more so than other religious communities. And I'm talking about non-Palestinians. I'm talking about Pakistanis. I'm talking about other Muslims from other Arab countries being sort of energized by this conflict. So that is true. Nevertheless, there is in terms of the Palestinian liberation movement. I mean, Palestine before recent times, historically, if you go back to the 70s, there were many Palestinian organizations that were secular in nature. The PFLP, the DFLP, as well as Fatah itself these are much more secular organizations. They don't make reference to Islam or Muslim as an identity. That's not the essential element of their ideology. They're concerned more about the occupation, about the treatment of Palestinians under Israeli military rule, and they're concerned about can Palestinians have a homeland in which they feel safe, right? So I think
We've got several hands up on the screen. So let me call in Michael.
Yeah. You started from saying that there is no justification for what Hamas did on October 7, but then you're essentially accepting Hamas framing of this conflict and promoting this framing. And there are so many things wrong in this framing. I mean, historically inaccurate, logically inconsistent, that I cannot hope even to list all of them. But starting from this one, that you said that Israel will not accept Palestinian state. From what I know, Israel never rejected this idea of two-state solution, at least officially. But on another hand, Hamas never accepted the right of Israel to exist. So how could you see any possibility of achieving the peace between Israel and Hamas as long as Hamas rules Gaza? if one of these sides does not accept the right of another side to exist. And by the way, related issue is that Zionism is not this theory that Israel is perfect and cannot be criticized. Zionism is simply about the right of Israel to exist and nothing else. So anti-Zionism is the denial of the right of Israel to exist. And this is not exactly the same as anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is broader, of course, but it's a part of this. But let me stop at this because my 2 minutes are probably over.
Okay, thank you for the question. So let me take the last part first. So the question of anti-Zionism, what we are referring to is opposing what the essential part is opposing what is Israel's policies and the policies of occupation.
But this is not anti-Zionism. This is simply criticism of Israel, which is legitimate as of any state.
Well, Israel is saying that is an anti-Zionism, and so they're using that as an argument to suppress any kind of criticism of Israel.
No, this is not true. Israel is saying that this is anti-Zionism when it goes to that Israel does not have a right to exist.
Okay, so
Palestine from the river to the sea, it implies that there is no place for Israel there. This is anti-Zionism.
Okay. So let's take that. So indeed, Palestinians use this slogan, from the river to the sea. So the river to the sea, I'll tell you what the intent is. The intent is about the right of return. Is that Palestinians were expelled from their homes throughout Israel-Palestine, and the argument under international law that they have a right to return to their homes, to their former homes, and those homes were from the river to the sea. So there's nothing inherent in that statement that says that Jews and Palestinians are mutually exclusive, that when Palestinians return to their homes, that Israelis have to be pushed out. There's nothing in that. So that's one thing. But I understand that statements like that can be misinterpreted if we don't understand, the context and what they are, what the speakers are referring to. As far as Hamas,
I was just wondering if we should go on to another question.
well, let me take
Yeah.
the question about Hamas because this notion that Hamas does not recognize the existence of Israel comes from one translation of the original covenant of Hamas that was written in 1987, which is a one line in the covenant which says that Israel should be nullified. I mean, when I look at that text in Arabic, I interpret it as the nullification of Israel. It does not mean the elimination of Israel. I mean, the meaning in Arabic, and every interpretation of that covenant has been based upon that one translation that was done at Yale University many years ago. When I interviewed Hamas officials in 2006, every one of them said that we believe in a two-state solution, which means that there is a recognition officially by Hamas in the right of Jews to to live and exist within some borders or some arrangement in Israel-Palestine.
But Hamas charter says otherwise.
No,
No,
I learned Arabic. It's not, there's a narration, basically, it's destruction to zero. That means no Jewish will be there. I learned Arabic at school. I've been there. I was born in Israel, so my mother. I've been in 1948 fight. The refugee is people that been convinced by the Egyptian army, the Syrian army, and who else to leave their home for a few days, and then they come and get all the land of the Jewish. That means this was their choice. Haganah was not to game, what called purpose was not to make the Arab go away. Haganah is protection. When my father need to go to work, he has to have some people from the Haganah with him, so he will be able to go to work without being shot to death. So Haganah is protection, is not making the Arab go away. About the other organization, like the Etzel and the Lehi. Etzel was actually prevented by the government. They tried to bring a ship full of ammunition and tanks and not tanks, guns and all the stuff, and the government burned it completely because they don't want to have a terrorist organization. Lehi was fighting against what's called the English mandate, and they was completely crazy. One of the daughter of the leader of the Lehi was in my classmate, and we have lots of argument. And she say, we're doing good. And I say, what you done, it doesn't make the British go away. About the name Palestine, the first time it called Eretz Plishtim in the Bible. The Roman called this area, the western side, as Palestine because they don't like the Jewish people. The other area was Judea and Samaria. So Palestine was part of this area by the colonialism of Rome. There was external power. Second time it called Palestine when the British come with another colonial name of the place. So the name Palestine is done by people that conquered the area for external property. Now,
Is there a question here?
yeah,
Is there a question here, Leonid?
yeah, it was not there. In the time of the Ottoman, the Mamluk, and the Seljuk, all those Arab or Muslim governor, they called Syria. It was not Palestine. Only the British renewed this name because there was colonial, and they put this name because they shared this area of the Middle East between French and the British. They get a mandate. Remember, Sykes-Picot.
correct. So these borders were created. The current borders were created by the Sykes-Picot Treaty in 1916. But that doesn't mean that the people who lived in what is today Israel-Palestine did not exist. Okay, there were people, whether they were referred to as Palestinians or not. Those are human beings who were other than Jewish. So there were Jewish and there were non-Jewish people living at that time under the Ottoman rule in Israel, in what is today known as Israel-Palestine. You cannot erase them.
Okay, let me get to, excuse me, Zem has had his hand up for a while. I'll get to you next. But please be brief.
My turn?
Come down to a minute.
Yeah, Zem, try to
My
keep.
turn.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if this is a question or merely a statement, but I must say I'm extremely disappointed in your talk, and let me tell you why. My understanding is that we were supposed to be talking about the coverage of events in the current war. And to me, the most salient part of that is the establishing of facts and the way you verify those facts. And obviously, we are in a fog of war. And so this is extremely difficult. Many journalists have been killed in Gaza, as I'm sure you know. Um, and critical thinking requires us, of course, to discern facts from opinion. And you're absolutely right that there will be a narrative that's spun by both sides, as there always is in war, right? And these are very interesting topics, but instead, we got 30 minutes of an editorial. Not that I disrespect your views, but they are a dime a dozen. We have everyone on this call and everyone in this room has an opinion on this. This is not interesting in a sort of probative sort of sense. What is interesting is the mechanics of it. How do you use critical thinking? How do you establish facts? When you say things like X and X was suppressed, there are facts that behind this that you must demonstrate, you must present.
Thank you.
Anyway, I'll stop.
Well, I've attempted to give you some facts when I talk about elections, when I talk about the withdrawals or
What's your name?
Oh, Amelia.
expansions of settlements. These are facts. These are not opinions, and so.
Well, I'm
within-
talking about the
within
coverage of
limit-
the present conflict. You're giving me a history lesson, which is interesting, but this is not, I think germane to at least in my opinion, to our meeting today.
Okay,
Well-
Amelia,
Oh, hi. So why, I don't,
speak into the microphone.
okay, I always think of the United States as trying to do the right thing, but why is the United States continuing to support the bombing of all of those innocent Palestinians? Thousands of them. Why? I don't understand why we're justifying that. Sure, they say they're trying to get after Hamas, but Hamas it's not all of those Palestinians. And they're also seem to be targeting some of these journalists that, seem to want to present the other side of the Palestinians. But anyway, my question is why, how do we justify that? Bombing all of these innocent people.
Well, so there's the official justification, which is that the U.S. the U.S. has Israel's back, and the Israel the U.S. supports Israel's attempt to eradicate Hamas. Of course, this goal, of course, I mean, this goal of eradicating Hamas, I mean, is like saying that can you, in the United States, can you use military force to eradicate, let's say, the Democratic Party? Can you eradicate the Democratic Party by military force? I mean, if people believe in that organization, it doesn't matter. It could be the NRA, it could be anything else, right? Can you eradicate them, that organization by military force? It doesn't make sense. So that goal of eradicating Hamas by military force, by a continuing campaign of that is killing 18,000 now as I speak. It's 18,000 have died. It doesn't make any sense.
Okay, this is the last question. Peter, I see you got your hand up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Just a quick question about if you could address the issue of Jewish, I don't know what you call it, self-righteousness, or they think that Jews are the chosen people of the God. They're kind of like Ubermensch in the Nazi terminology. And you can see the evidence of that with what Netanyahu recently said, quoting, I think it was a Torah or Bible or something, that we should go and kill not only men, women, children, but also their animals, and not leave any living being left. So how much of it is just a racist ideology of supremacy?
Well, I think it is. Sadly, I mean, let's not generalize for the whole Israeli population, right? Israelis are divided politically between left and right, and all shades in between, and there are right-wing parties that articulate, you know, these kinds of positions, including the position by one of the ministers very recently of describing Palestinians as human animals. So there is an element of racism there, because you can only say those things if you see Palestinians as the other, that they are not part of us, and the conceptualization of the West Bank as not as an occupied territory, but rather as Judea and Samaria is a reference to, is a religious reference to an area that they believe should be under full Israeli population and control, which is today the West Bank. So there is, I agree with you that there is an element of supremacy. I mean, you can't be an occupying power and not have an ideology of supremacy.
All right, thank you.